Thank you so much. So, Salya, magandang umaga po sa lahat. Before I proceed with my sharing, I would like to pay homage to one of my mentors in the ecumenical movement and interreligious dialogue, Reverend Father Richard Baba, who is with us here today. So thank you very much, Father. I also would like to acknowledge the presence of my fellow resource speakers, Reverend Father Junito Obillo, and of course Sister Heidi Fajardo. Both are our friends, and of course my colleague at the Institute of Religion, Professor Val Brillo. Since my time is quite limited, so allow me to, in a way, read the proceedings of my sharing to you. In a way, later on, we will have a very personal sharing towards the end of this concurrent session. So, the topic that is being assigned to me is on synodality and the ecumenical movement. So basically, my task here is to explore the interplay between the synodal vision of Pope Francis for our church, contemporary church, and at the same time, the ecumenical vision of the Second Vatican Council. So first and foremost, allow me to remind each and every one of us of Pope Francis' vision of synodality. So he said that synodality is not a chapter in an ecclesiology textbook, much less a fad or a slogan to be bandied about in our meetings. Synodality is an expression of the Church's nature, her form, style, and mission. So what does it mean? So synodality is more than just a word or a slogan. Synodality is an expression of the very nature of the Church, the process of discerning how the Spirit is moving us so that we may continue to fulfill our mission to evangelize in the world. So please take note of the phrase, the very nature of the church. So synodality, or being a synodal church, is the constitutive element of the Church of Christ. And this is basically the vision and mission of our new evangelization. So the question that we have to ask ourselves as part of our reflection is, how is our community or your community preparing for this synodal journey? In the Philippine context, basically, we have our way of preparing for it. But before that, to allow a more general, universal reception of the vision of Pope Francis on synodality, so there is this preparatory period or phase. And in this preparatory phase, they were able to come up with a preparatory document. Then afterwards, it was quite received very well. No? It was quite received in the Philippines, and we were able to come up with a document on synodality entitled Salubong. So in the preparatory document, so let's try to find out the vision and mission of the church, of the synod of the church. It says there, the Church of God is convoked in synod. The path entitled for a synodal church, which is communion, participation, and mission, will solemnly open on the 9th to 10th of October 2021 in Rome, and on the following 17th of October in each particular church. One fundamental stage will be the celebration of the 16th Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops in October 2023, which will be followed by the implementation phase that will again involve the particular churches. So indeed, this document is now being provided, okay, or produced in order to guide the different local churches all over the world in order to receive the vision of Pope Francis for the church as a synodal church. So with this convocation, Pope Francis invites the entire church to reflect on a theme that is decisive for its life and mission. It is precisely this path of synodality which God expects of the church of the third millennium. So this journey, which follows in the wake of the church's renewal, proposed by the Second Vatican Council, is both a gift and a task. By journeying together and reflecting together on the journey that has been made, the church will be able to learn through her experience which processes can help her to live communion, to achieve participation, to open herself to mission. So our journeying together is in fact what most effectively enacts and manifests the nature of the church as the pilgrim and missionary people of God. So how did the Philippine church respond to this invitation? For the CBCP's part, we have this document, okay, pagsalubong or welcoming, wherein it says there in the introductory part, its vision and its grounding. So Jesus is risen indeed, and our synodal consultations in the Philippines were an experience of Easter. So like the traditional Filipino salubong, which we celebrate annually on Easter dawn with the reenactment of the encounter between the risen Lord and the grieving Blessed Mother, our own encounters became an experience of new life. So the imagery that is being adopted by the Philippine church in response to the invitation of Pope Francis for a synodal church, for forming a synodal church, is the image of our tradition, salubong. So the act of reaching out to those in the peripheries, mimic the salubong ritual of the women and men meeting each other. So the vision, therefore, of synodality or of a synodal church is a church that is quite welcoming. It's a church that is inclusive. And this is quite a significant transformation, a paradigm shift, an attitudinal shift on the part of the church, from being an exclusivist church to being a synodal that is a welcoming church. Furthermore, in the document, it states there, and I want to highlight some of those things. It says there that the faithful are not equipped to dialogue with other Christian denominations and other religions, primarily because or due to lack of a deeper understanding of the Christian faith. So this is the observation now, because take note that this document, Salubong, it was actually a finding. This is born out of the series of interviews, surveys from the grassroots, from all the stakeholders of the church. And one of the findings there indeed is that unfortunately it was found out that the faithful are not equipped enough to engage into dialogue with our Christian brethren. Interestingly, dialogues with Christians are seen during the annual celebration of the Week of Prayer, Christian unity through programs and activities, but according to the document, this only happens in the official level, in the high-level meetings. So such dialogue, according to the document, such dialogue encounters are limited to the leaders and active members of the various Christian churches. So meaning to say, it is not yet cascaded to the grassroots level yet. And that is why, at the grassroots level, you can still sense this animosity, okay, towards other Christian brethren of ours. And therefore, we are still not yet on that level of synodality. We are not that very welcoming yet towards our Christian brethren, if that's the case. So this is what the document has found out. Another thing, many reported that these programs are active at the diocesan level, but are not being practiced at the parish level. So most Catholics in their area, according to this document, are not even aware of the presence of other religions and Christian traditions, and that they are called to learn to relate with them. Also, we have to take note here, so the church opens its doors to other Christians and people of other faiths in times of natural calamities and other emergencies, and that the Catholics welcome them in their home. So this is more of a hopeful experience on the part of the church, that the Catholic Church during these calamities was able to experience a more welcoming church, wherein the church is able to welcome other Christian traditions or even other religious traditions or non-believers for that matter, and extended help during this period of calamity. So perhaps we could start from there. This is what the document was able to surface from that surveys and explorations. All right, so the question that we have to ask now ourselves is, how does the ecumenical movement embody or exemplify the synodal journey, and what initiatives or practices contribute to these expressions? Now, so we transition now to the ecumenical movement and how it is received in the Catholic Church and eventually in the Philippine Church. At the dawning of the third millennium, some Christians, in particular devout Catholics, were preparing themselves to welcome the new millennium in the spirit of thanksgiving and hope. This was despite a near universal acknowledgement that there were many mistakes and needed to be corrected so that the celebration as one Christian community would be more complete. In the past, Christians tended to blame one another for causing the wounds of division. However, at this point in history, it was agreed that there was widespread responsibility for this unity. So the call for conversion and renewal resounded in unison across the Christian world, and the Christians undertook responsibility to repair the damage. So this is before Vatican Council II. There was already a movement, what we call ecumenical movement. So the concrete response to the call for Christian unity was the ecumenical movement. While the ecumenical movement began in the early years of the 20th century among Orthodox and Protestant denominations, it was only after the Second Vatican Council that the Catholic Church fully embraced the ecumenical ideal. So if you notice, it was only late in the game that the Catholic Church joined the game. So the one that really started the movement on ecumenism were the Orthodox Church and the Protestant churches. But with the Vatican Council II, so the Catholic Church has eventually officially embraced the ecumenical movement. So from then on, the Catholic Church assumed a significant lead. Today, substantial agreements between the Catholic Church and the Christian churches and ecclesial communities have developed. Several matters of disagreement have been smoothed out. What is encouraging is that Christians agree that it is necessary to find ways to reaffirm our common ground. They also agree that it is necessary to work towards resolutions, or at the bare minimum, to find a common ground. So they have been upfront and stated their fear of compromise and the danger of absolute relativism. So these achievements are the fruits of the ecumenical dialogue. So the Second Vatican Council indeed transformed the landscape of the ecumenical enterprise. And the Second Vatican Council reframed the Catholic Church's ecclesiology from one that is exclusivist to being inclusive. So we consider the real, according to the degree of the ecumenism. So it says there that we consider the real but imperfect communion communion that exists among our church and other churches and ecclesial communities, and we have begun to live into a deeper communion. And that we have moved from an ecumenism of return to a mutual respect, using dialogue as the means for disclosing our agreements, those things needing resolution and a common pilgrimage towards that unity for which Christ paid. So it means that before, when Vatican Council II was, starting to adopt the ecumenical movement, the idea was that the vision was that to encourage our brethren to return to the Catholic fold. So that was the old paradigm or the old framework of ecumenism. But later on, it was realized that that was not really the ideal framework. Okay, so what is now the ideal framework? The ideal is a dialogical and welcoming church, a respectful church. So our theological understanding has shifted from seeing the Roman Catholic Church as the one true church to an affirmation of the fact that the one true church subsists in the Catholic Church, but the elements of the church are alive and saving in other churches, and that we are all wounded while the scandal of division remains. So this is significant precisely because our old ecclesiology is that the Catholic Church is the true Church of Christ, or the true Church of Christ is the Catholic Church, because quite exclusivist ecclesiology. But with the ecumenical movement, so the Catholic Church with the Vatican Council II, so that framework has been transformed into a more inclusivist. And therefore, in the Lumen Gentium, it's stated there that the Roman Catholic, or the true Church of Christ, subsists in. It is no longer the Catholic Church, but that it subsists in. So this is a very significant paradigm shift or theological shift in the Catholic Church. And I hope you would appreciate it. So in his encyclical letter on commitment to ecumenism, Ut Unum Sint, that is, that they may all be one, which was actually the Christological prayer published in Rome on May 25, 1995, Pope John Paul II recognized that in light of his office, a substantial burden of initiative rested on his shoulders. In a seminal move that was hailed not only by Catholics but also by non-Catholics as providential and prophetic, Pope John Paul II promulgated this encyclical letter, okay, which is a significant moment for the ecumenical movement, because the ecumenical family now, okay, has celebrated in a sense that we have now our own encyclical letter. Okay? So this is now our own, our very own. We are in a way creating our own ecumenical identity in a very big enterprise of Catholic theology or Christian theology. It further says there, we no longer speak of separated brethren, but of fellow Christians. So as St. Pope John Paul II reminded us, the commitment to reestablishing full and visible communion among all the baptized does not apply merely to a few ecumenical experts. It concerns every Christian from every diocese and parish and from every one of the church's community. So please take note of this. I forgot to highlight this, but this is very important because this is an invitation now by the then, and of course, our very own St. Pope John Paul II, that the ecumenical movement is for all Christians, not only for Catholics, but all Christians. And in the Catholic world, of course, from every diocese and parishes, and so on. Now, what then is the way to do it? No? So we have here, according to the Directory for the Application of Principles and Norms of Ecumenism, we were reminded that we have a common baptism, and that's what we should highlight, that there are those things we share in faith, and in our common scripture, it helped our Catholic identity, but at the same time, it helped us form our understanding of our common Christianity. So that is in the universal church. How about in the Philippine church? How was the ecumenical movement received? So recently, we were able to have a significant, fruitful, and meaningful result or reception of the ecumenical project envisioned by the Second Vatican Council. And later on, this will be shared further by our invited friend from the IFI, okay, from the Anglican Church, by Reverend Father Julie. So we were able to form or establish an ecumenical, what we call this, organization in the Philippines. And then we were able to, the culmination of this was the drafting and eventually the publication of our Magna Carta, no? In the Philippine Ecumenical Movement. The title of this document is One Ecumenical Family. So it was participated by of course, CBCP and the different Christian churches all over the Philippines. And this is the document. No? So the title is One Ecumenical Family. We have our representative from the CBCP, of course, one of our signatories, and then we have other signatories here as well from other Christian traditions. So I would really invite you to please visit this or Google this and read the document. It's very short, only one page, and then try to reflect on this and how we will be able to really exemplify or embody the synodal vision of Pope Francis for our church. So this is now two slides left, my conclusion. So synodality and ecumenical movement. So the new evangelization is the order of the day. This is according to Pope John Paul II. He said further, the task of evangelization involves moving toward each other and moving together as Christians, and it must begin from within. Evangelization and unity, evangelization and ecumenism are indissolubly linked with each other, because the question of the new evangelization is very close to my heart as Bishop of Rome, and I consider, according to Pope John Paul II, these two as overcoming the divisions of Christianity, one of the pastoral priorities, not only of his pontiff, but also of the Catholic Church. Indeed, no? In conclusion, from the insights of Father Joseph Ratzinger then, and our Pope Emeritus, Pope Benedict XVI, he said that the real crisis has scarcely begun. We will have to count on terrific upheavals, but I am equally certain about what will remain at the end, that the church of the political cult, which is dead already, but the church of faith. And if I may add, the church of dialogue, indeed an ecumenical synodal church. Thank you.
Magandang umaga sa lahat. Sa kapitatagan nating mga pari at mga madre at seminarista. Meron po akong kaklase dito, si Father Richard, Baba. Magandang umaga po. My task for you this morning is to be able to clarify the what, the who, the why, where, when, and how of interreligious dialogue. Hopefully, I will be able to find connections between IRD and synodality in a very concise presentation. I will start with the why of interfaith or interreligious dialogue for the purpose of our forum. I will, to a certain extent interchange this. Why was interreligious dialogue established in the Catholic Church? According to the Statista Survey 2022, Christians account for 31.6% of the global population affiliated with major religious groups. Muslims account for 25.8%, Hindus for 15.1%, and Buddhists for 6.6%. To name a few, of the major religious groups. Let's compare this 2022 data to the 2010 survey of the same institution. We notice that three major religious groups, namely Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists, have increased in percentage. For Muslims, we have 4.7% increase in population of adherents, 1.84% for Hindus, and 0.76% for Buddhists. While Christianity has decreased by 1.6%. We also notice that the percentage of other religions in 2010 was 12.48%, which dropped significantly to 0.8% in 2022. We may ask why there is a drop from 33.32% to 31.6%. And where did the 11.68% of believers of other religions go? I may not provide you with the answers to this question, but what we can observe from the data is something that we need to look into as adherents of Christianity. With a dramatic increase in accessibility to other peoples and their cultures due to more developed means of communication, now with the internet, and improved transportation, there has been a rapid migration movement of believers from one place to another. The growing desire to understand other religions and cultures, and some experience the recovery of their sovereignty after the period of colonization that forced people in these former colonial countries with their different religious traditions to work together to build their nations despite religious differences. And people also who feel the sense of shared humanity and fraternity work for the cause of human welfare and international development across different nations. Such living together of peoples of other faiths and cultures and communities vis-a-vis the increasing awareness of religious freedom, Christians ultimately find themselves in a situation where they ought to reflect on their faith and their identity as followers of Christ while learning how to relate with the believers of other religious traditions. With this, the church must discern a proper and more fruitful way of presenting Christ to others, along with the truth and universality to which it claims, and thus develop a more appropriate style of relating with other religious traditions. Notwithstanding the Trinitarian, Christological, theological, and pneumatological reasons, in the social and religious context, a new form of activity in the Catholic Church has come into sight, and that is interreligious dialogue. What is interreligious dialogue in the understanding of the Catholic Church? Although the Second Vatican Council did not give a definitive meaning to interreligious dialogue, its seminal foundation was established by several of its documents, from Lumen Gentium, Gaudium et Spes, Ad Gentes, Dignitatis Humani, and along with Nostra Aetate, Pope Paul VI Ecclesiam Suam paved way to the advent of dialogue. Ecclesiam Suam describes the link that exists between the Catholic Church and other religions. It further recognizes the presence of other religions in the context of engagement through dialogue. Maybe we can show the Ecclesiam Suam, yes, okay. The concentric circles, is it there? Yeah, okay. That's the concentric circles, okay, advanced by Ecclesiam Suam. You will see there at the center is the Catholic Church. How does the Catholic Church relate with those, circles going outside? The first one is, you know, the Catholic Church has to relate with what Philip said a while ago, fellow Christians who are not Catholics. Thus, the establishment of the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Dialogue, and that is ecumenism. How does the Catholic Church relate to the believers of other religious traditions, specifically the Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Islam, interreligious dialogue? And of course, those people who may not have a sense of belief or system of beliefs, intercultural dialogue, the Pontifical Council for Culture. Ecclesiam Suam describes this link that exists then between the Catholic Church and other religions. It further recognizes the presence of other religions in the context of engagement through dialogue. Thus, we have the concentric circle. For the first time, this document identifies how non-Christian religions relate to the Roman Catholic Church with their spiritual and moral values. Nostra Aetate landmarked a positive relationship with other religions, but it left specific issues open for further theological explanation and even exposition. The case in point is, in 1984, the dicastery of the PCID, or the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, published a document, Dialogue and Mission. Dialogue and Mission is a landmark document because it's the first official document of the PCID that commemorated, in fact, 1984, 20 years after the publication of Ecclesiam Suam and the establishment also of the Secretariat for the Non-Christians, now the PCID. And it says here that it made a step forward by providing a reflection and orientation to the Church's attitude to other religions. And I think this is a very crucial point right now in our context of synodality. How well have we been relating? What is the kind of attitude that we have when we relate to people of other faiths? Dialogue and Mission expand the avenues by which such an attitude may bear the fruit of positive relationships. It consolidates the overall commitment of the Catholic Church to other Christian traditions. By placing dialogue in the very mission of the Church, Dialogue and Mission becomes the first magisterial document of the Church after Nostra Aetate to make a theological breakthrough in accepting and promoting the Church's apostolate of interreligious dialogue. For the first time, in an official Roman Catholic document, dialogue was defined as walking together with people of other faiths. Take note, walking together. As early as this time, PCID already laid down the path to synodality. Isn't that interesting? That was in 1984. Dialogue then, as defined, as walking together with people of other faiths, seek the truth, to work together for projects of common concern. Interreligious dialogue, according to the document, refers to the cooperative, constructive, and positive building of relations between people of different religious traditions and or spiritual or humanistic beliefs at both individual and institutional levels. This definition gave a more direct understanding of IRD following Pope Paul VI's definition of dialogue with non-Christian religions as the recognition of their spiritual and moral values, and promotion and defense common ideals in the spheres of religious liberty, human brotherhood, education, culture, social welfare, and civic order. The third, when and where was interreligious dialogue established in the Catholic Church? Interreligious dialogue was institutionalized at the Second Vatican Council in the Roman Catholic Church. Since the establishment of the Secretariat for Non-Christians on May 19, 1964, now Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue, the Catholic Church's official dicastery for interreligious dialogue, and the publication of Ecclesiam Suam on August 6, 1964, the Church has grown immensely in its relationship with other religious traditions. Who is the protagonist then of interreligious dialogue? When everything had been identified and established about interreligious dialogue, what the Church has envisioned since St. John the 23rd opened the council to have an adjournamento is for the Church to be able to dialogue with the world so that it may be able to understand, take note, may be able to understand not so much about the world, but of how the Church understands itself and how it can make itself, its presence felt so that it can extend and make salvation available to all men. Mission. So, two questions arose. First, since the mission of the Church is to evangelize people, how should one regard the non-Christians who want to remain in the religions? Second, is the identity of Christians compromised at the moment of dialogue? Through interreligious dialogue, the Church carries this task to non-Christian religions. To bring the mission of salvation to non-Christians, the Church has to relate with them, and the language of dialogue more clearly, according to Dialogue and Mission, should be the norm and necessary manner of every form of Christian mission. That is, for all to live dialogue in their daily lives. The goal of relating in interreligious dialogue is not only for the messages to get across the line to achieve something, but more importantly, to learn by sincere and patient dialogue what treasures a bountiful God has distributed among the nations of the earth. So for us to discover these treasures, these elements which are true and good, Tatam Tusios, 16. These elements of truth and grace at Gentes, number 9. The seeds of the word at Gentes, 11 and 15. And the rays of truth, Nostra Aetate, number 2. We have to learn the language of interreligious dialogue. Not listening to the voices outside of the confines of Christianity is, in reality, closing the manifestation of the Holy Spirit, who is present in and speaks through the other, thus losing the possibility of sharing in the Paschal mystery of Christ. This is why not engaging in interreligious dialogue is in reality not fulfilling one's mission, that is, bringing people into the dialogue of salvation towards God. This is why the Church, as an essential part of its mission, is to engage in IRD, so that we can listen to God in others and through others. As Cardinal Joe reminded us yesterday, we must listen humbly and be open to the possibility of being converted. Our goal is not to convert the other unless we mean by conversion as the humble and penitent return to the heart of God. It calls both Christians and non-Christians to an understanding that conversion is not a transfer from one faith to another, but a conversion to the way of God, to the heart of God. Interreligious dialogue aims not to convert, but to reaffirm what the Christian faith can contribute to the search for truth, which enlightens all men, and to share the message of salvation with those who do not share their religious convictions. Interreligious dialogue essentially fulfills this task. With this, we can say that the future of the mission of propagating Christ as the way, the truth, and the life passes through interreligious dialogue. Taking the path of interreligious dialogue is learning how to cross to the other side and understand how the other wants to be understood, listened to, and cared for. Perhaps IRD can contribute to synodality. What IRD can contribute to synodality is our sense of metanoia, a change of heart, a change of our sense of attitude and orientation to people of other faiths. Sa pagtahak natin sa landas ng interreligious dialogue, ay matutunan natin kung paano sumalya sa kabilang ibayo. Learning the ways of interreligious dialogue is learning how to journey with the other, in the other, and for the other. Thank you.
Magandang umaga po sa lahat. Maraming salamat po sa pag-welcome ng isang Agripayano sa lugar o sa institusyon na matagal ng panahon na naging kabahagi ng buhay ng mga Pilipino. Maraming salamat po. I am supposed to share my experience in the ecumenical movement, but I cannot discuss the ecumenical journey without presenting my church. And I am a member of the Iglesia Filipina Independiente or Philippine Independent Church or mas kilala na Aglipayan Church. Aglipay ay continuation ng Filipinization movement ni Father Pedro Pilais at Father at Gumborsa. Sumari sila sa revolusyon noong 1896, mga Roman Catholic na mga pari yan. Karamihan yan, mga Ilocano. At hindi na sila bumalik sa Roman Catholic after ng revolusyon noong 1896 at Filipino-American War in 1902. Nagtayo na lang sila ng simbahan na Iglesia Filipina Independiente. At sa simula, mayroon siyang tradisyon na Trinitarian from 1902 to 1907. Pero nung na-formulate yung Officio Divino ng IFI, yung kanyang teachings ay naging Unitarian dahil siguro sa exposure ni Isabelo de los Reyes Sr. sa ibang religious institution, lalo na sa US. Pero pagkatapos ng Second World War, through Isabelo de los Reyes Jr., ang aming Supreme Bishop, Obispo Maximo, 1947, sinikap niya makabalik sa Trinitarian doctrine. Kaya, na-approve yung Declaration of Faith and Articles of Religion 1947. Nagkaroon ng ugnayan ng Protestant Episcopal Church of USA and the Iglesia Filipina Independiente. Kaya noong 1961, nagkaroon ng Concordat of Full Communion ang IFI at ang Episcopal Church, Protestant Episcopal Church of USA. At nandyan sa board yung nandyan sa screen yung kung anong meaning ng Concordat of Full Communion. Pwede kami magsimba sa Episcopal Church. Pwedeng mag-serve ang Episcopal Church ng parish sa IFI. Share kami ng seminaryo sa ngayon sa St. Andrew's Theological Seminary. Pero hindi kailangan na may organic union. Yun po ang full Concordat of Full Communion. Ang IFI noong 1976, gumawa ng statement on ecumenical life kung paano kami mag-behave, paano kami makipag-ugnayan sa ibang simbahan. At yan po ang aming paniniwala na iisa lang tayo. Sa totoo lang, ang IFI ay malapit sa Roman Catholic Church, pero malayo din. No? Oh, ngayon, magkalapit na, magkadugtong na. Pero dati, 19 to 1940s, 47, malayo yan. Magkasalubong yan sa prosesyon, mag-away muna bago makarating doon sa kanyang simbahan. Oo. Kaya, malapit pero malayo din. Pero, sisisikap nating magkaisa. So, may common ground. Yung common ground natin ay maging witness sa pag-promote ng kaharian ng Diyos. Yung kaharian na sinasabi natin ng love, peace, justice, freedom, and truth. Kaya ang IFI ay naging kabahagi ng Concordat na malawak, no? Protestant siya, pero mayroon din pagkakatoliko. The Episcopal Church in USA ay Catholic tradition. The Anglican Communion, based ang Church of England, pinamunuan ng Archbishop of Canterbury, ay Catholic pero Protestant din. Ang Old Catholic Church sa based sa Netherlands ay kakonkordat din ng IFI. Tapos, member ang IFI ng World Council of Churches na sinasabi ni Professor Philip kanina na Protestants and Orthodox. Member din siya ng Christian Conference in Asia. Pero sa Pilipinas, ang IFI ay member ng National Council of Churches in the Philippines. Ang National Council of Churches in the Philippines ay may 10 simbahan lang. Sa daming simbahan ngayon. Sa Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches, 200 churches and para-churches sila. Ang dami nun. Hindi pa siya kabahagi ng National Council of Churches. Ang dami pa nating trabaho. Sa later development, ang IFI nag-establish ng Concordat of Full Communion with the Church of Sweden. Yung tradisyon nila, Lutheran. Pero bago magrevolusyon ang Scandinavian countries, Roman Catholic sila. Ayan. Tapos, yung Episcopal Church in the Philippines, naging province sila ng Anglican Communion noong 1990. Nag-establish ulit kami ng Concordat, 1997. Parang hindi pa kontento yung IFI. Nag-establish siya ulit ng partnership with the United Church of Christ in the Philippines. Member na yan sila ng NCCP, pero gusto pa nilang palalimin pa ang pagkakaisa doon sa grassroots. Magtulungan sa theological education, sa social action, at development programs. Experience namin yan doon sa mga grassroots level, pagtutulungan. Pero dito sa Metro Manila, na-establish yung Quezon City Ecumenical Fellowship. At doon mas lumawak ang aming pagtutulungan dahil naging kabahagi namin dito ang Roman Catholic Church at Evangelical Churches. Sa Roman Catholic Church, maraming mga lay na member ng Focolare movement. Kaya yan, kanya-kanya yan, mga tradisyon. Evangelical at Roman Catholic. Yan ay nagkakaisa sila sa isang fellowship. Noong 2019, bago mag-declare ng nakapasok na ang COVID sa Pilipinas, October 23, 2019. Mahalaga po itong sa kasaysayan ng Pilipinas, ang October 23 ay mahalaga sa history ng simbahan. Kasi October 23, 1899 ay nagkaroon ng paniki assembly ng Filipino clergy. Doon dinisign na mayroong simbahan sa Pilipinas na Pilipino at hihingin sa Roma na bigyan ng obispong Pilipino ang simbahan sa Pilipinas. Hindi lang yun na realize. Filipino-American pa. Pero ang nag-propagate ng librong ito ay si Father Ambrosio Manaligot. Ang maganda ang kanyang sinabi. Simbahan Katoliko sa Pilipinas, Pilipino ang namumuno at patuloy ang Katolikong paniniwala. Kung na-realize yun, walang Iglesia Pilipina Independiente. Yun po. Kaya yung breakthrough noong 2019, ito yung mga nag-uusap, paano nga ba? Paano nga ba tayo magkakaisa? 500 of Christianity sa Pilipinas? Paano? Mayroon tayong common statement dapat. Kaya, yan, picture lang yan, pero pagkatapos niyan, marami silang ginawa at nagbuo yung one ecumenical family statement na binanggit ni Professor Philip dito na magandang basahin, isang page lang. Hindi lang yan Roman Catholic, hindi lang yan Mainland Protestant, true NCCP, kundi Philippine Council of Evangelical Churches. Imagine ninyo yung 200 and churches and para-churches ng Philippine Council of Evangelical kung magkakaisa. kasama ng Roman Catholic Church plus other Protestant churches and independent churches sa Pilipinas. Kahit may mga Amerikano tayong mga kasama, nandito sila sa Pilipinas, wala silang choice. Pilipino sila. Sabi ko nga sa aking mga pakipag-usap sa mga kaugnayan natin, kung nagmamahal tayo sa Pilipinas, dapat ipakita natin sa mga Pilipino na nagkakaisa tayo. Promote natin yan dahil hindi na promote. Hindi na. Aywan kung sino pa nakabasa. Kunti lang yan. Kaya kami ay sinubukan namin magtulungan. At sa tulong namin at Ateneo University, Tanging Yaman Foundation na pinamumunuan ni Father Manuel Francisco. Nung pandemic, namigay, bumili pala sila ang Tanging Yaman Foundation, pero dinistribute hindi lamang doon sa mga communities ng Roman Catholic, pati mga Protestant churches. At pinalawak natin yan sa pag-usap ng synodical ecumenism. At nagawa niyang picture na yan doon sa San Miguel sa Archbishop's Palace. Siyempre, nabiyayaan ang Iglesia Pilipina Independiente sa 500 years of Christianity dahil nalinaw ang ugnayan ng Roman Catholic Church at Iglesia Pilipina Independiente at nakagawa ng dalawang statement, joint statement in celebrating the 500 years of Christianity in the Philippines na in-strengthen na magtutulungan, hindi na mag-awa, hindi na magbabatuhan sa prosesyon, magsasama na sila. At yung binyag, hindi nang bibinyagan ulit ng Roman Catholic ang mga IFI kung makapag-asawa ng Roman Catholic, kung mag-aaral sa institusyon ng Roman Catholic, wala nang binyagan. Kaya mayroong mutual agreement of baptism na sign noong August 3, 2021. Yan nga, ito yung signing na yan sa aming katedral sa Top Avenue. Of course, bumalik kami sa paano nga ba natin i-promote ang one ecumenical family. Kaya sinubukan namin magtayo, mag-usap at magtayo ng organisasyon dito sa Manila. Kasama namin sila Father Richard, Father Caloy, sila Professor Bung, sila Professor Val at Professor Philip. Discuss kaya natin, paano natin lalamanan, paano natin bigyang buhay ang one ecumenical movement. Kaya sabi natin, tayo natin yung kahit sa mga taong simbahan lang muna, sa church people. Kaya tinawag namin Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship. Pero Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship, pero sa Quezon City ng Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, sumali sila dito sa launching. Yan ang statement namin. Yan ang launching dahil pandemic, video lang, virtual lang. Pero sa tulong ng mga course, LDS, nagpahiram sa amin ng Zoom ng maraming makapag-attend. Kaya, ganda ang launching nga. May message si Cardinal Advincula tungkol dyan. Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. Ginagawa yan ngayon, January, pero noong January 19, 2022, nagawa ng Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship ang Week of Prayer for Christian Unity sa Manila Cathedral. At yung mga picture na yan, nagawa niya. kasama yung LDS at magkausap ng LDS at Arch ang Cardinal ng Manila, malaking bagay yan para sa ipakita natin sa mga tao na tayo sa Pilipinas ay may kaisahan. Mayo, nananalo ang inyong presidente. Ang Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship naglunsad ng ecumenical prayer May 6 sa Manila Cathedral ulit upang ipanalangin na walang dayaan. Hindi lang tayo nanalangin, hindi natin na ipanalangin na sana hindi automatic yung 31 votes kaagad sa isang araw. Yun. Nagkaroon pa ng ecumenical prayer noong 2023, panahon ng EDSA, sa National Cathedral ng IFI ginawa. Ibig sabihin, yung Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship patuloy na nananalangin, patuloy na nagre-reach out sa bawat isa. Of course, magpapatuloy siya. Sa pagpasok nung celebration ng anniversary ng Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship na ginawa namin sa Roman Catholic Church sa Malati, may dumating na iba pang mga simbahan. Roman Catholic traditions pero hindi sila naging kabahagi ng Roman Catholic Church sa Pilipinas. Brazilian Catholics, mayroon pang Roman Catholic Society of Pope Leo XIII. Mayroon pang nadagdag sa amin ngayon na interesado din, North American Old Roman Catholic. Siguro mga Katoliko to sila pero hindi rin Katoliko. At gusto namin maging inclusive tayo. Sige kayo, mag-dialogue tayo. At yun ang basis na magandang sa dialogue, magkausap tayo. Kaya patuloy ang mga, of course, kuha namin to sa headquarters ng Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints. Noong January 6 lang, kasama na lang sila Heidi. Of course, kabahagi ang Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship at Quezon City Ecumenical Fellowship noong creation o season of creation activity doon sa Christ the King. So, marami din ang nakibahagi doon. Mayroon dito sa Pilipinas, hindi ko na alam mayroon na palang Orthodox sa Pilipinas. Coptic Greek Orthodox Church. Kaya, kailangan natin din silang iyayain na makiisa. Dahil nandito sila, maging Pilipino sila. Magpapatuloy ang gawain. Siyempre, ang Episcopal Church, nasa itaas na picture, ang UCCP, at ang Unida Ecumenical, ay mayroon kaming bilateral agreement, pero dapat magtutulungan sa Manila Church People Ecumenical Fellowship. At hanggang sa level sa grassroots. Yan po, kuha namin yan sa payatas na gusto namin ipadama na hindi na lang doon sa itaas ang pagkakadugudayan at pagkakadugtong. Kailangan dalhin ang ecumenism doon sa community, sa mga lugar ng mga anawin. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. I am so grateful to be here. I acknowledge the wonderful presentation of Val and Philip. At least, klaro na sa atin kung ano yung interreligious dialogue at saka synod, or synodality. And then very inspirational din yung presentation ni Father Diony because it may have been a long journey, Father Johnny, but it was a very successful journey. And so because of that, let's celebrate today. Brothers and sisters, and you notice I called you brothers and sisters as I started to greet you, because you are literally my brothers and sisters, because we are all children of God. No? And on that note, I would like to start my presentation. The task that was assigned to me was to make sure that I present some of the interreligious efforts, interreligious dialogue that we have had with the Uniharmony Partners Manila and our encounters with the Archdiocese of Manila, the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Manila. Saan si Father Richard? Lumabas? Daya niya. Because I would call him actually. Can you text him? Nag-CR lang. Okay, sige. So, before I begin, I'd like to share with you this scripture that is common to all of us. So it says, that they may all be one as thou, 3 a.m. po kasi ito ginawa. That they may all be one as thou, Father, art in me and I in thee. That they may also be one in us. That the world may believe that thou hast sent me. So basically, we want to be one. We want to follow our Savior, our example. We want to follow His teachings and example to be one. And on this note, I'd like to share a video that details some of the examples of our leaders on the top level. Our President Nelson meeting with Pope Francis, and this is an inspiring example to us also. Because if they can do it at their level, how much more with us when we deal with the community. Mabuti, nandito na balik si Father Richard. So I'll call on Father Richard mamaya. So I'll also include some of the efforts that has been done with Uniharmony Partners Manila, with the church, and with ARCAM.
Most cordial, unforgettable experience with His Holiness. He was most gracious and warm and welcoming. We talked about our mutual concern for the people who suffer throughout the world. We want to relieve human suffering. We talked about the importance of religious liberty, the importance of the family, our mutual concern for the youth of the church, and the need for people to come to God, to worship Him, pray to Him, and have the stability that faith in Jesus Christ will bring to their lives. So, what can we do? We can pray, we can love, we can minister.
The Center's largest event is the annual International Law and Religion Symposium, held each fall. As many as 100 delegates from all over the world gather in Provo to discuss challenges to religious freedom of belief and to collaborate on possible solutions.
These efforts represent an ongoing desire of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to teach and live the two great commandments, to love God and neighbor. We are impressed to call on people of this nation, and indeed the entire world, to demonstrate greater civility, racial and ethnic harmony, and mutual respect. We don't have to be alike or look alike to have love for each other. We don't even have to agree with each other to love each other. If we have any hope of reclaiming the goodwill and sense of humanity for which we yearn, it must begin with each of us, one person at a time.
Okay, so that's just one of the videos that we would like to show. There's another quick one later, but at this point, I'd like to say that when we started with Uniharmony Partners Manila, when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints started participating in 2013, I think we have really gone a long way, to build harmony, to build peace among different religions. So as a network of different faith-based organizations, we respect doctrine. There's no compromise of doctrine, but everybody can just come together, which shows that what unites us is more powerful than what divides us. So this is just one of the fruits of the unity of Uniharmony Partners Manila. In 2016, we received the second prize award from King Abdullah of Jordan. It's the award for World Interfaith Harmony Week. It's a global award, and the Philippines got the second place. And so you have there in the red jacket, that's Father Richard Babao. Actually, he has gone to Jordan, to Petra. And there's one of the photos of us receiving the award from the king. Okay, wait. So something that's also interesting that we have done in relation to the World Interfaith Harmony Week is the Interfaith Peace Camp. And so I'd like to share some of the testimonies, because my topic is on testimonies, some of the testimonies of the youth that have participated in the Peace Camp. Can you have volume, please? Okay, so we'll go back to that. Okay, I'd like to call Father Richard on the stage, please. Because I'd like to discuss about the interreligious encounter between missionaries and seminarians. And Father Richard, being the very good person that he is, received inspired, direction from our Father in heaven. So Father Richard, can you tell us a background? Because it was you who really approached me on this. What was your objective? What was your vision?
Good morning. This is not planned. I had free advertisements from 3 guys here. Well, as Professor Val said a while ago, he was my classmate in law when we studied ecumenism and interreligious dialogue. And it was during those times that I realized that It's not enough to, to study about the documents, about what the church wants about relationship, but it's more important to really encounter people. I had this experience once when I went to France to attend a conference, and it was sponsored by the Lutherans. But in going there, I was not aware it was sponsored by the Lutherans. And so when I went there, I looked at the list of participants. There were about 75 Lutherans and only about 5 of us Catholics. And that they gave me a chill in my spine. No? Parang talagang kinabahan ako. And there's this pastor from New York who said, "Oh, so you're a Catholic? They'll take care of you." And that really got me scared. But anyway, after just a few minutes, we've been talking and all that. That was the time that I realized if I go back and if ever I'll be given a chance to teach in the seminary, it will not be limited to lectures. There has to be encounters with students or seminarians or people of other faiths or other Christian communities. And so one time, the first time I met Miss Heidi was during the I think that was the second World Interfaith Harmony Week celebration at Villa San Miguel, the residence of the Archbishop of Manila. It was, I think that was really the first encounter with a Mormon, at least in person that I was talking to, because she said, "Father, can we distribute calendars?" And then I said, "Huh? It was really, I really paused for a while because I was like, what's in the calendar? And then I said, it's a calendar, what's the problem? And so I said, oh, okay, it's fine. And then that was the time that we had the chance to know each other with the regular activities of the Uniharmony Partners Manila. And then after about 2 years, I said, Ate Heidi, is it possible if I can bring my seminarians to your missionary training center and meet the young missionaries? We just get to know each other, just have a chance to to have that encounter. And the first time we did that, it was really beautiful. We didn't expect that these young people, our seminarians are older actually because the young missionaries were from 18 to 21 years old. In the theological seminary, we have seminars from 22 to 25 to almost 30, and with the seniors with almost 46 years old. But it was a really beautiful encounter because initially it was only about 20 seminarians and about 5 missionaries. Later on I said, is it possible that the number of seminarians, you have the same number of missionaries as well? So we did that. And every time the seminarians and the missionaries share about the encounter, it was really beautiful. And I think one of the most significant was when a seminarian from Bulacan, when we went back to class a week after, I said, can you share anything about what you have experienced? And the seminarian said, Father, I had this thought that with this encounter with the missionaries, and we are both facing Jesus. And then I was thinking, if Jesus said, the Roman Catholic Church is the real church. And then I said, I would say to the Lord, Lord, this is my friend. He is a Mormon, but he is my friend. And if the Lord says the Mormon church or the Latter-day Saints is the real church, he said, I would hope we would say that I'm his friend too. Every encounter is different, but every encounter is really beautiful. It really breaks down the fear that we have built with each other. Fear because of what we simply thought of the other as somebody really threatens us. But in reality, they're just like us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father. That was beautiful. And I would like to reiterate what Father said, no? We are really the same in the sense that we have the same aspirations. We want to love our families. We want to be happy. We want to provide for our families. We love God. We want to serve others. We want to have peaceful societies. So in a way, we have to come together to make these all happen. I'd like to share with you another photo. So this is one of the fruits of our encounter. So you have there Cardinal Advincula and our area president holding a basketball. We didn't build the basketball court, of course, but we did help spruce it up. Because Father said, Ate, every time you go to your missionary training center, it's so beautiful, while my gym is not as beautiful or really needs help. So because we love each other as brothers and sisters in Christ, there's a need to help each other. So this is one of the projects that came out of this interreligious encounter. We also build relationships with Muslims. No? There's the iftar gift giving that we usually do. We've also helped with Marawi, with food and education centers, and that's part of our interreligious dialogue because again, we have to come unto Christ, and we can only come unto Christ if we also help our brothers and sisters and follow his teachings and example. And of course, we celebrate International Women's Day together, and so on and so forth. But probably I would like to end with a testimonial from the youth who attended the peace camp.
Been in this camp for almost 3 years, I think. There are always some new ideas, some new things that I'm about to discover, and I have been more happy every time I go to the place.
I got to ask them about their religion, about their traditions and stuff that I'm really, really curious about.
We should be united despite our differences, despite of our cultures. We should see the beauty inside of each and everyone.
We're able to realize that unity is very essential. Without unity, we cannot do things. So we need other people. We need their hands to help us.
Nakita ko kung ano yung magandang bagay, yung pagkakaparehan natin sa kanila, na hindi pala iba yung paniniwala natin sa paniniwala nila.
Capturing Filipino is pagiging magkaisa despite of adversities na nangyayari. Diverse culture is here, but then again, we're aiming for the so-called oneness, and that's very important.
invite all of you to a sacred concert here at the UST Quadricentennial Pavilion on February 25. That will be at 7 p.m. The Tabernacle Choir and Orchestra will be singing hymns of praise for God together. This is in partnership with the Conservatory of Music here at UST. And we're grateful for the support of the Rector, the very Reverend Richard Ang, and the support also of Cardinal Advincula for this effort, for this interfaith, interreligious effort. So we hope we'll see you at that time. And I'd like to end by thanking my friends from Uniharmony Partners Manila for the friendship and for the peace and for the harmony that you have brought to my life. I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.